So hello everybody and welcome to Kagyu Samyuzang Edinburgh for this fourth session. I think it's the fourth session in the series of Living the Legacy of Akong Rinpoche. So exploring and hopefully taking on board his teachings. And this one is entitled Advice from the Heart. But before we get to that, let's set our minds well, and first of all we'll say the supplication to the root Lama, who in my case is Akong Rinpoche, but whoever your root Lama is. And then we'll say the Vajradhara lineage prayer to Dorji Chang, the primordial Buddha. And of course that also is a supplication to all of the gurus of the lineage. Okay. Glorious, precious root Lama, above my head on a lotus moon seat, you care for me with great kindness. Please bestow the siddhis of body, speech and mind. Great Vajradhara Tilunaro Marpamila Dharma Lord Gampopa, knower of the 3 times, omniscient Karmapa, holders of the 4 elder and 8 younger lineages, Drikanta, Klung and the Salpa, glorious Drukpa and so forth, masters of the profound path of Mahamudra, to the dark Po instruction lineage, the peerless protectors of wanderers. Kagyu Lamas, I supplicate you, I uphold your lineage, grant the blessings of your liberating lives. Just as revulsion is taught to be the legs of meditation, this meditator clings not to food and riches, and has severed the ties to worldly life. Grant your blessings for detachment from honor and gain. Just as devotion is taught to be the head of meditation, this meditator constantly prays to the Lama, who opens the vault of pith instructions. Grant your blessings for uncontrived devotion to well-forth. Just as non-distraction is taught to be the body of meditation, this meditator simply remains without altering the fresh essence of whatever thought arises. Grant your blessings for parting from the concept of meditation. Just as thought is taught to be in essence Dharmakaya, for this meditator unhindered manifestation dawns. Nothing whatsoever dawning as whatever may appear. Grant your blessings to realize inseparable samsara nirvana. May I never in future lives part from authentic Lamas, and embracing ever the glory of Dharma. May I perfect the qualities of the levels and paths, and thus swiftly attain the state of Vajradhara. Okay. So we're going to be looking at advice from the heart. And this is, of course, advice from Rinpoche's heart, so we're talking about the heart of a great being. And I think it's good to remind ourselves that who Rinpoche was, and is in terms of his mind. Obviously the body is not with us anymore, but the mind is. When Tibetans talk about mind, they often point to the heart. So heart and mind are kind of almost conflated, really. So the mind and heart of Akong Rinpoche. A great being, a true bodhisattva. And so he's someone from who we really should listen to that advice, because many people will offer their advice to us, and quite often it's well-meaning, but unless they are high bodhisattvas or Buddhas or, great, highly realized beings, then no matter how well-meaning it is, it's only a 50-50 chance of it being correct, if that. And the same for the advice we offer, so we might mean well, and of course we should try to help beings according to however involved we are. But in particular, we really need to treasure the advice of someone like Akong Rinpoche. And, of course, our parents that hold us dear usually, and they want to give us the best advice, but the good intention is not enough. It's as if, for example, if you know, for example, the journey from here to France, let's say, you've done it many, many times, then you're in a position to advise people about how to get to France. But if you've never been, you've maybe imagined it, but you've never been, so whatever advice you give is maybe not so consistent with the journey. Perhaps you just imagined it. So it's always best to get the advice from someone who's been there, who knows it well. And when we're talking about the heart and the mind, the consciousness, then the more realized a person is, the more useful the advice is. So it's not against other people like your parents or whoever it is that are doing their best by you, and some of their advice will be fine, it depends what we're talking about here. But in terms of your spiritual progress, then they're maybe not so well versed, as indeed we are not. So we need to remember this, and also because however well-meaning it is, if someone doesn't have the wisdom or the experience to back it up, then that advice is not likely to be so helpful, if we're talking about spiritual progress here. But someone like Akong Rinpoche, we need to really recall what he is, what he's done, the life he lived, and his teachings, of course, this legacy that he's left us. And it's really good to remind ourselves of this, because Rinpoche himself is extremely modest. So if in his life and when he refers to himself, he's very, very, to the point of being very self-effacing. And this is true of not only Rinpoche, but most highly realized beings will put themselves down, when they're talking the first person. So very humble, very self-effacing, not at all brash. So in other words, the polar opposite of what most advice or professional influencers give us today. So just to bear that in mind, not only for Rinpoche, but if you're reading things in the Reign of Wisdom, for example, they all have this very, very humble, modest attitude. So, our parents, who usually do love us and want the best for us, they will see things in a more worldly way of looking at things. They won't be coming from such a high spiritual level, obviously, but they do want the best for us. But they generally see that as being, and this is a generalization, as being more to do with being successful in life, being happy, being prosperous, maybe happily married, or whatever they hold as being a good way to live, that's what they'll want for us, isn't it? Even we can take the Buddha's parents, a king and a queen. They wanted the best for him, to be a world ruler. That was the choice. It was a world ruler or a holy man with no money, but with a great influence. But they wanted him to be a holy man, didn't they? Not a holy man, to be a great ruler. So this is very normal for parents. That's what they want. They want how they see what is successful and happy worldly life. So we just need to bear that in mind. You know, they want to have us to be married, have children, they want grandchildren, and etc. And then we have advice from our friends, don't we? People are quite want to give us advice about how we are in life, and that tends to be more concerned with being independent, maybe leaving the family home and striking out on your own, and how to get ahead professionally, possibly, you know, professional success. And that too, you know, is rooted in a worldly way of seeing. Can't say it's a bad thing or anything, but it's definitely a worldly way of looking at life. But when we get advice from a good spiritual teacher, there's nothing to do with that. This is a spiritual advisor is a different view, coming from a different viewpoint altogether. So let's have a look and we'll contrast these. So when spiritual people, a spiritual person gives advice, whether it's given to friends or students, they look, this is coming from Rinpoche directly now, they look at how to be successful in terms of spiritual development. So already there's a vast difference, isn't there? They're not concerned with material happiness, not much concerned with material happiness. You know, you can take care of that yourself. We are very material beings, we won't starve. So they are concerned with the happiness that comes through understanding and practice. And this happiness is not based on competitiveness, such as the advice that we might be offered by our peers, for example, or even our worldly teachers. You know, you've got to be the best, or your mother and father, you've got to be number one, get to the top of the class, or whatever. It's not that at all. It's based on the development of loving kindness and tolerance and wisdom, inner wisdom. The fundamental thing is that this happiness doesn't have much to do with this life. Fundamentally, it's not so much to do with this life, but rather with the next life or with the future lives that you're going to lead. Progress and constant improvement in life after life is the important thing. So it's got a way broader view. When we talk about life, we're just talking about this life, isn't it? Oh, we want to do well in this life. But the Dharma point of view is this life, but mainly in how it's going to affect future lives. So there we see a dichotomy straight away, isn't there? Because if you don't have the understanding of future lives that you're going to be experiencing in future lives, you won't be bothered about them, because they're not on your radar at all. But this is fundamental to the Buddhist view. It's not the relative worldly view of most beings, or a lot of beings. So we do need to get our heads around that. And because then we have a very different view of our life, our current life, and we see it more in terms of how it will affect future lives. Of course, it also affects this life. It's not that it's divorced from future lives, it's very, very much part of it. You could say it's all sort of one long life with interruptions, with intervals along the way. And of course you have a different body, but all of this will be depending on your actions in this life. Your karma, that is what karma means, isn't it? It means actions, not some sort of reward or what's loss system or judgment or any of that. It's what your actions in this life will influence your future lives. So therefore, the spiritual advice takes that into consideration, whereas worldly life just doesn't at all. So we're talking about a very long view, a very broad view, a limitless view, actually, because there's no end, so no beginning, no end. So this is why it's a completely different kettle of fish to when somebody's advising you how to pass an exam or do well in this life, and you're not saying that you shouldn't do well or something like that, but that's a very limited point of view. And the Dharma point of view goes beyond that. But then again, you could say that if your actions are wise and kind and loving and wise, then that is also going to affect your current life well as well. Not necessarily in terms of having lots of money or wealth or something like that, but in terms of your well-being, your mind. And if your mind's in a happier state, it doesn't matter how much money you've got. Otherwise, everybody that was rich would be happy, and that clearly is not the case. So really the spiritual way is to see things as they are, not this mistaken view of how we think they are, or we wish they were, or sort of chasing after false ideas, expecting to be fulfilled by the best career or the best house or the most money or all of these things, because those things they lead to more and more wanting and desires and never-ending thirst that cannot be quenched. So it seems, back to Rinpoche, if it seems that you are not going to have much worldly success in this life, the spiritual teacher is not overly concerned. It's not a big deal. That's not really where the emphasis is. However, the spiritual teacher is greatly concerned with future lives and with preparation for death and dying. He or she is concerned that you die happily, not with regret, and have achieved something in this life. When achieved something, not meaning how much money you've got or how big your house is or any of those things. What they're concerned about is that you haven't wasted your precious human life, and that you've fully achieved the purpose of a human life. That is the advice of spiritual people, to achieve the purpose of a precious human life. And if we go back to the four foundations, we can see how they impact all thought, all wisdom. This is not something that you just tick up and, I remember doing a precious human life, years ago, I did that. Yes, but have you understood it? Have you got the meaning? Do you apply it? Do you see life in that way? And it's not easy, because all of the surrounding zeitgeist is saying something opposite. This is what's important, to get ahead, and so we have to really keep it in mind, and our Dharma practice is something that has to affect our way of being, our way of thinking deeply. That's why we're looking at this. Otherwise, it's just something you read, and then you forget, get another book out, and read another one, and, So you can see that advice is something that comes deep from the heart. Different people's advice has a different scope. For example, a mother's advice is very much to do with love and gentleness and taking care of families. A father's advice is more about how to achieve things that he's possibly not been able to achieve. Very often you want the best for your children, so I wasn't able to do that, but I'll put them through a better school and then they'll be able to do it, whatever it is. It's like achieving the dreams of the father. It could also be the mother. And a friend's advice is about winning life's competitions and less to do with the family or spiritual life. The teacher's advice is that the father's advice, the mother's advice, and the friend's advice has only impermanent benefit. It might have some kind of benefit, but it's impermanent. And we know that, don't we? Supposing you do everything that, your mother and father said, and that, you should study hard, do this, do that, get the great job, all of these things, and you've done that, and you get the benefits from it, but it doesn't last. It very often doesn't last in this life, let alone any future lives, Otherwise, everyone would, the one that was boss would always be the boss, and there'd never be any change, there'd never be any movement. It would be a static, impossible thing, It's not how life is. We only have to look around us and see. Again, we're going back to the four foundations, the impermanence of life. But do we really apply it in our lives? The teacher's advice is looking for long-term benefit for the students and how to improve their future lives. They're not concerned with material success. So when you look at all these people together, they're all giving advice in different degrees, but it all comes down to the same thing. It's about how to make positive change, how to be good humans, how to become better practitioners. My advice, which is talking from Rinpoche's point of view, is something that comes from the heart, and it's based on a spiritual perspective. You have enough of the other kind of advice. You have, those of you who have a father and mother, those of you who've got friends giving you advice all the time, they do that much better than me. I don't need to repeat it, the advice that they give you. So he says, that's not his kind of advice. You get plenty of that from other sources. So we really need to think, what are the implications of this, And now he gets quite, this is a real insight into Rinpoche, this next paragraph. He says, my own failure is a lack of constant practice. I see so many people in monasteries, monks, nuns, lay people, they go for many years retreat, 4 years, 8 years, 12 years. I always think of myself as a Buddhist, but I have never been able to go to retreat for more than 3 months in my whole life. Now I remember when, after I'd done some retreat, I was talking to Rinpoche and he was saying, how did your retreat go? And we were talking a little bit, and then I said, I know how. I said, I wish you could do some retreat, Rinpoche. What I meant was, because he works so hard all the time, I wish he could have time out to do some retreat. And then I caught myself and I said, but you don't need to do retreat, do you? And he said, I do. Because I first of all, I was thinking, just have a break from all the all the work and just do your practice or do some retreat. I wasn't presuming to say, you really need to go and retreat, but because I saw how he works from dawn till dusk and often through the night. And I saw that, and he worked closely with him. So what I meant was that I wish you had time out to just, do your spiritual practice. But then I realised when I said it that it sounded a bit sort of presumptuous, and I said, no, but obviously you don't need to do retreats in terms of your spiritual development. And he said, no, I do need to do retreats. But now, bearing in mind, he's very humble. So I've not done more than 3 months in my whole life, so I think that in terms of practice, I'm a failure. When people ask, can you please teach me how to do sadhanas or how to meditate, I do not know how to answer because I don't know how to teach these things. I'm not enlightened. I do not even know what it means to be enlightened. I have morals. I know right from wrong. I believe in being honest and good, but apart from that, I do not have much experience. The words pinch of salt come into my mind. Not that he didn't mean it, he absolutely does mean it. He really does mean it. But in comparison to him, we're like babies, we just... Akong Rinpoche constantly worked for the benefit of others. Everything he did was for the benefit of others. I never saw him do anything selfish. That's not to say he didn't enjoy his life, But his motivation was all for the well-being of others. And he goes on to say, I think it is very excellent to go into retreat, but sometimes people say things like, I've done 10 years of practice, or I've done 20 years of meditation practice, but I've not achieved anything. So then when you ask how many hours of practice they do, they say, I do up 1 whole hour every day. Well, there are 24 hours in a day, so what do you expect? You're so proud of doing 1 hour of meditation each day, and some of you say, I have achieved something. I don't think that's possible. Also, when you sit for 1 hour, how much time do you really spend meditating? This is what we should ask ourselves, How much time of that hour are we actually meditating? He carries on. Brace yourself. Like most people, you get up in the morning, you get your breakfast, you might have children, get the children dressed, go to school, then you have to think about your business or your studies, your office during the day, and then you sit on a cushion for an hour. Even then, you spend that time thinking about your business or the person you had a fight with yesterday. You think about what you're going to say to that person today and how you're going to deal with them. Then about what you're going to fix for your children to eat when they come home from school. You're always thinking about your life. Which route should I take? What food will I cook? Are the children safe? So that's your meditation. He's really going strongly into this meditation thing. It's really so valuable, this, and you have to acknowledge if it has any truth for you. Sometimes you may say of your meditation, I had a very good experience. This time it was good. Sometimes I ask people and they say, I had a very good meditation experience. What do you mean by that exactly? What do you mean? Maybe you were in a kind of sleep state. But sleep is not meditation. Going into a trance of some kind is not meditation. You've spent 1 hour on the cushion, But as for meditation, maybe you've not done more than 2 or 3 minutes. So what benefit do you expect from 2 or 3 minutes a day for over 30 years? Maybe you do much better than me. And maybe you're able to spend your whole hour doing actual meditation, whatever that means to you. I'm not so sure what it means. Most people seem to think that meditation is something where you do not move and you lose track of time. People say, I had such a good meditation that I completely lost track of time. It's very common. And when I looked at my watch, the time was already up. Rinpoche says, that is like a kind of sleep or being drunk. Do you consider being half drunk as meditation when you lose track of time? You don't know where you are. You say, I had a good meditation and I meditated together with the teacher. I lost track of time. I lost all my sensations. But do you consider paralysis as meditation? I do not think the teachings ever said that you need to become paralyzed. Maybe I have not achieved much, but I have read many meditation texts, and nowhere does it say that meditation means you forget everything, become paralyzed, or lose track of time. My advice is to try to understand what meditation is and to find a good teacher. Meditation cannot be learnt from books. Meditation is not something a friend can help you with. For meditation, you need a spiritual teacher. But you should not choose a teacher based on literature or adverts or publicity or high titles. Nowadays, there are lots of advertisements on the internet, and people say things like, I can tell your fortune, I can see future lives, I'm enlightened. A person once came to see me and told me he was enlightened. So I don't know why he came to see me. Maybe he wanted to teach me. Nowadays, the internet promises so much happiness and can also be the cause of so much suffering, with people searching not just for teachers but also husbands and wives. You can look for all sorts of treatments on the internet. You look for happiness, but how many children are damaged looking for this and that on the internet? Boyfriends and girlfriends, or how to do this and how to do that. I'm sure you will have similar problems if you believe what you find on the internet. Rinpoche died, 10 years ago, more? 12 years ago, isn't it? And the internet, if anything, got more harmful, more toxic. He could see already how it was going. When you're looking for a spiritual teacher, do not look at the advertisements, the publicity, the big titles. When you're looking for a teacher, it is important to do so in person, so you meet them, not just on the internet, and not to make a quick decision. You can wait to see if you have found a good or a bad teacher. You should be together with that person for 9 years. For 3 years, you investigate the teacher. You get to know the teacher. And the teacher spends 3 years seeing if you are honest and worth teaching. So it's reciprocal. Then you work together for a further 3 years, and if you do things that way, you will make fewer mistakes. You have to really get to know the teacher. So the previous few paragraphs about meditation, I find those really, really valuable. You could say that's an exercise in sort of curbing your expectations, you know, and busting some myths along the way, you know. So it's all about, you know, Rinpoche's got his feet firmly on the ground, you know, he's so practical, so down to earth. Being spiritual does not mean to say you're up there with the fairies. You need to be rooted. And so he comes at it from a very realistic point of view, not a wishful thinking point of view. And being totally honest about himself and about others, about life in general. So he goes on more about the teacher-student relationship and how important it is and what you should and shouldn't do. So in the case of looking for a teacher, sometimes it happens that you've been working together for many years and you're thinking, this is a good teacher, and you commit to that person. Then another teacher pops up. Maybe from India, from Tibet, from Nepal. Could be from anywhere. This teacher, the new one, seems, much nicer, gentler, wiser. So you give up the previous teacher saying, bye, I thought you were good, but now I found a better teacher. And you keep changing throughout your life. It is not worth doing that because you will have wasted your time totally. My heart advice to you is to do things slowly and to look at things carefully. Do not just look at what's written on the notice board or the publicity, but feel the heart of that person. It is not like choosing a husband or a wife. Also, you need to bear in mind that one teacher may be good with some particular advice, some particular type of teaching or advice. You can still look for advice from other teachers. It doesn't mean to say that you have to be exclusively only learning with one teacher. You may find that one teacher is good for some things, while another teacher is good for a different type of teaching. And you can learn from them all and appreciate them all, without being, as it were, married and divorced and married and divorced. A spiritual teacher is different from the relationship you would have with a husband or wife. And then, bearing in mind that Rinpoche had, the vast amount of experience he had, not only in the spiritual aspect, but also in his life, living in the West for a long time, as well as the East, going backward and forward to Tibet, a vast panoply of human life, all around the world, So he has all that experience as well as his spiritual outlook on which to advise us. It's not as if he's purely a spiritual being and he doesn't know anything at all about relative and worldly life. He knows both sides of the coin. Of course, for him, the line in the lineage prayer that we rattle through, bless me that I may realize samsara and nirvana to be the same, to be one, to be through one you learn the other. So he has realized that view. Not just rattled it off when we say it, So, he says, there are two problems which I often see. He's talking about the teacher-student relationship. Sometimes a teacher reaches the limit of his or her knowledge but considers the students to be his and doesn't want the student numbers to go down. Teachers are frightened to lose students because their students maybe have been very useful for them. They think they need them to maintain the level of business in their life. They want to keep the students, whether they are doing good or harm. They do not consider a person's development. It's all about their own comfort. This sort of teacher is making a big mistake. That person's become selfish. As for the student, if a good teacher passes the student on to another teacher, having developed that student as far as he or she can, the student may not have appreciation for that first teacher he or she was studying with before. Or he or she says, "Oh, now I see his limitation and I'm free from that person." That is a big mistake too. It is a good teacher who is passing you on to a great teacher. The teacher is really thinking of your development, and you should have appreciation and respect for that. Your respect for the teacher should not change, because if you had never made that first step, you would not have reached the second step. Therefore, it is very important to have respect. But we can see how that works, isn't it? You don't just discard somebody because they've passed you on to someone who may be able to teach you something else or something, take you further on. Many people do not have that feeling of respect or sense of responsibility for their centre. They do not think, I have been in this organisation for so many years, I am part of that organisation. Sometimes when another teacher comes and visits that successful centre, they look to see who is working to create that success. And then maybe that new teacher tries to sort of say to the students, "Oh, I've got a project you can do for me." So that teacher gives people jobs and takes them away from the centre. And that is a big mistake. There is nothing to take from an unsuccessful centre, but a success is always a target. So he's being really realistic here and seeing how the worldly view can corrupt. And that includes teachers. They're not immune. Many teachers look for people who have some kind of magnetism or glow, and they think, oh, this one's rich or this one's well educated. You know, not all teachers are. Not all teachers have your best interest in mind. Let's put it like that. This one's rich, this one's intelligent, and people don't realise this is happening, and they think, oh, this is a very good teacher. We never had such a good presentation. I even get a cup of tea and a chance to have my picture taken with him. This is excellent. I'd like to join with that person. You know, they have a big name. And then you forget your responsibilities, and that is a mistake. I try not to do that, but I'm sure those mental images still arise. I'm a human being, but I hope that success does not mean I want all successful people to join with me. So he's always examining himself. He's showing us how to do that. You can imagine, I mean, you know, Sammy Ling, he created an incredibly successful centre. So often there would be other teachers coming and, you know, he'd invited them, of course. Therefore, you should not mix spiritual life too much with material life. Buddha had to give up worldly life in order to be a spiritual person. Perhaps it is possible to be a king and an enlightened being at the same time. Perhaps that's possible. But Buddha told his disciples that it may not be wise to mix up spiritual and material aims, things. On the other hand, if you are an experienced practitioner, then it doesn't matter what conditions you have. If you already have experience, if you're already well realized, then it doesn't matter what conditions you have. You can be rich, you can be poor, you can be a king, queen, monk, nun, layperson. The external form is not important. What is important is how you deal with your emotions, how you deal with your mind. But bear in mind, he's talking about someone who's already highly realized. And so for us, it does matter, something to do with the outer experience, such as being in a place that is conducive. So there's, just watching our behavior, being very honest with ourselves, because we're not there yet. We're maybe on the path, but we have to guard ourselves. And not everybody has to be a monk or a nun, but I remember when I took robes, I didn't expect to take robes. I had no ambition to take robes. In fact, if anything, I saw them as slightly not what I wanted to do, mainly because I didn't want to advertise where my beliefs were. I didn't see that was anybody else's business. So I was not rushing after being a nun at all. But anyway, through circumstances which sort of came together, I decided to take robes, and I found them very helpful to keep me on the right track. I'm not recruiting for being a monastic or not monastic, but in my case, I felt that I found it helpful. A bit of a wild child. I need a bit of taming, so I found it useful for that. It is possible to achieve enlightenment through normal life. You don't have to go and take yourself up to the mountains necessarily, although Milarepa would probably argue differently. No, but that's true again for Milarepa. He found it very helpful to be away from it all, and you can understand why. And that's how he got enlightened in one lifetime. People have achieved enlightenment whether they were ordained or not ordained. That was my question to all. Before I'd made up my mind, I would ask all the Rinpoches that came into Samyeling, and I said, "So do you think it's possible to become enlightened if you're not ordained?" Thinking that I had in my back of my mind, well, if they say, "Oh no, you have to be ordained," and then I was going to say, "Well, Milarepa wasn't ordained." But nobody ever said that. Nobody ever said that you had to be ordained. People have achieved enlightenment whether they were ordained or not ordained, living a very simple life. Sometimes they may have even been military people or warriors or kings or queens. If you are dealing with your mind the whole time, then your external form is not so important. If you are dealing with your mind the whole time. If you are unable to deal with your mind, then a particular external form will give strength to your mind. So for those of you who have certain weaknesses, let's say, or, foibles, making physical changes will support your mind and give it strength or stability. He's not saying that you have to get ordained necessarily, although it could be that. But it could also be about being in a place that's conducive, doing lots of retreats, anything that you can change about your exterior to help your interior world. So this is Rinpoche's heart advice, and some of it's quite hard, isn't it? It's not easy for us to take on board and to live it, let alone just even think it. He's really telling it like it is, and he's not pulling any punches. He's being very, very clear about what is and isn't meditation, but he praises it all, by saying that he's not done much retreat. He's hardly done anything. If he can say that about himself, that shows us how honest we have to be. Because we fool ourselves all the time. We think, I did some meditation today, it's all right, I zoned out, whatever that means, Oh, is that the time? Wow, I didn't even notice, like as if that's a good thing. I hear that so much. If you say, how's your meditation? And people will say, oh wow, yeah, I didn't even realise. Or they think they've had a bad one, if they've remained conscious of the time. Think, oh, I had a bad one today, I was thinking all sorts of things, Yeah, but you knew you were thinking them, so that's good. So it's all it's the opposite of what people think. It's not about drifting up into La La Land somewhere, So when you hear a great being like Rinpoche talk about himself in such like humble way, then it should give us pause for thought and what we're actually doing with our time, our precious human life. Do we really have that view of future lives, ongoing lives, So there's so much in there. It's in terms of length, it's a shortish chapter, but so full of good advice, and so beautifully put, so simple, but not easy. Rinpoche's English was not great. He was expressing himself simply, but it is so full of meaning. Why? Because it rings true. He's speaking from his own experience, So this chapter, the advice from the heart, there's a subheading that I thought I'd leave it till the end, because I think you've said enough about this. I think we need to meditate on it. Because we're filming this, we won't do a long meditation, because that would be a bit strange for people watching. But we should continue our meditation at home, and not just... Of course, it's also down to the quality of your meditation. So I think we'll just sit with some of Rinpoche's words, and the words that I'd like to sit with at the beginning of the chapter. So get yourselves into a good posture. We want to be awake and aware. Yes, relaxed. And just calm, but clear, really awake, and able to be absolutely honest with ourselves, because without that honesty there is no practice. And so Rinpoche says, the spiritual teacher is concerned that you die happily and have achieved something, that you have not wasted your precious human life. So with those words ringing in your ears, let them penetrate into your heart and mind. So, were you honest with yourself? This is what we should ask ourselves when we meditate. We should ask ourselves what actually happened then in that 15 minutes, you know? Did our mind wander? Did it go to the past or to the future? Both. Yeah. Did we notice? So, this is important that we notice. Anything? Everybody's extremely quiet. I just had a little nod. Did you notice? Past, present, future? All of them, yes. Were there gaps in between sometimes? and how does that feel? You know, when there is a gap. So we have something to, you know, it's hard, isn't it, to maintain awareness. You might have a little bit of awareness and then the next thought comes and you're off on another, or ramble somewhere. And so this is why we're still like babies with this. You know, we don't do anything like enough practice. And I speak for myself as well. So how do we expect to progress? Doesn't matter how many books you read. Really, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter how many languages you speak. We do need to practice, that's for sure. So yeah, I'm talking to me as well as you, and you, everybody in the world. Okay. And what I'm saying is that we need to be realistic and we need to be honest, because without that, there is definitely going to be no progress. And not living in some wishful thinking kind of thing. You know, we need to be realistic and where we're at and what we can do to further ourselves if we're serious about this. So anyway, Rinpoche said so much in that short chapter. I don't need to riff on it anymore. It's just if you have the book, you should read it. There was a few other things, but mainly it was the ones that I spoke about. Okay, so we'll finish our session with the dedication prayer, so that whatever we have, whatever goodness has come from this, and whatever we have been inspired by Rinpoche's teachings, that we genuinely dedicate the merit of our practice. Nothing should be like on a rota, we always say this at the end, and that's what you do. But really, with our hearts and minds, dedicate the merit for the benefit of all beings. Oh, by this merit may I obtain omniscience, defeat the enemy, wrongdoing, and so free all beings from the ocean of samsara, with its stormy waves of birth, aging, sickness, and death. Okay.